On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected
$3.5 million.
What difference at this point does circle back?
Big neutral bike there.
Each got a very different view of how migrants are being treated. 19 Republican senators boarded gunboats that patrol the Rio Grande after touring a Customs and Border Protection facility in Donna, Texas, with serious overcrowding.
The Donna facility is a giant tent city. Built with a capacity of 250, it has nearly 4,000 people in it. We saw cages after cages after cages of little girls, of little boys, lying side by side, touching each other, covered with reflective emergency blankets.
Senator Cruz posted pictures on Twitter, writing, "This is what the Biden administration does not want Americans to see." Democratic lawmakers toured a model Health and Human Services facility in Carrizo Springs, Texas, with 4 unaccompanied minors to each bedroom, classrooms, nurses, recreation, and new clothes. With COVID distancing, the facility can hold 750 minors.
Thing of a Hunter Biden story. This is really surprising. It turns out his former sister-in-law, who became his girlfriend, then they broke up. They had an incident, at which time she went out, who is the widow of Beau Biden, took his gun and threw it in the supermarket garbage. At which time he told her, and she said, "Go back and get the gun." It was gone. They went to the supermarket, who called the cops because they want to make sure that gun wasn't involved in some type of crime. It would have tracked back to Hunter Biden. They go to the it ends up fast forward to the gun store, where somehow the Secret Service is there and told the gun owner to give me the paperwork, so they were going to take it so it wouldn't track back to Hunter. It's hard to know what bothers you most about this story, but can I ask you to make that decision?
Yeah, this is bizarre on so many levels. Also, Brian, the FBI was reportedly there, which is incredibly peculiar. The FBI would be there. We know they were investigating Hunter for something unrelated, of course, his taxes and potential money laundering. Secret Service, you mentioned, extremely bizarre. They would be there because, of course, Vice President Biden's kids would not have had a Secret Service detail at that point. So the fact that they would be involved at all is strange and odd. Nevertheless, actually going to the gun store and trying to get the paperwork. But you know, to me, Brian, I read this story, and it's one in a series about Hunter Biden, and I just have to wonder, the press never covered this, and they meddled in the election by never covering it. And Jack Dorsey, who pathetically said this week, "I regret censoring the New York Post story." He censored them for 2 weeks, and he called it an error. He censored me as the president's press secretary in my personal capacity when I tweeted this, blocked me from Twitter. It's too little, too late to just say, "I apologize."
And the next chapter in that is, how did he get a license? Because they ask you, you're addicted to any drugs. He got kicked out of the military because he tested positive for cocaine. So.
Congress Nancy Pelosi repeatedly puts her arrogance on full display.
Diversionary tactic on the part of the Republicans because they are bankrupt of ideas on how to improve the lives of the American people.
I think they're just scaredy cats. They just don't know what to do.
Well, that's not an appropriate question for you to ask.
So don't mess with me.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much.
Have you fed them? We feed them. We feed them.
Well, you could see the arrogance right there. After spending 2.5 months blasting President Trump and Republicans for questioning the certified results of the presidential election, and in so many counties and states, by the way, Nancy Pelosi wants to overturn an already certified congressional election where the Republican in Iowa won by just 6 votes. She wants to throw it out now, but it's been certified. The hypocrisy here. So apparently, you are only allowed to challenge the results of an election if you're a Democrat. And then Pelosi had the audacity to level this so unconstitutional threat.
Well, and we want to be fair. Now, if I wanted to be unfair, I wouldn't have seated the Republican from Iowa, because that was my right on the opening day. I would have just said, they're not seated. And that would have been my right as Speaker to do.
In what world or country does she live in? I don't think so. It's not her right. Under no circumstances would our founding fathers envision a scenario where the majority party could refuse to seat a member of the minority party. But to Nancy Pelosi, she truly believes she is all-powerful.
Parler says it sent the FBI a series of posts on January 2nd from a user who said he'd be wearing body armor to the rally 4 days later. Parler quotes the user as saying, quote, "It's no longer a protest. This is a final stand where we're drawing the red line at Capitol Hill. I trust the American people will take back the USA with force, and many are ready to die to take back the USA." In another post, a Parler user said, quote, "If Congress does the wrong thing, expect real chaos because Trump needs us to cause chaos to enact the Insurrection Act." The FBI is declining to comment on this report after repeatedly claiming it had no specific credible threats about violence on January 6th.
A nation of immigrants. So what are you going to do to solve this challenge long?
Well, the premise of your question isn't right. We are a nation of immigrants. That is absolutely right. My father came to America from Cuba in 1957. He was 18 and he couldn't speak English. He had $100 in his underwear. We're a nation that is built by people coming here seeking freedom. And there's no nation on earth that is more generous, more welcoming to immigrants than the United States of America. But there's a right way to come. The right way to come is legally, following the rules, following the rule of law, coming here legally. The wrong way to come is putting children in the custody of human traffickers. These are vicious transnational criminals. As several folks told you, we just saw a dead body floating on the Rio Grande coming by of someone who died, crossing, no doubt, with a trafficker. This is inhumane, what is going on, and the Democrats have made decisions. Joe Biden and the Biden administration have made decisions that are causing these people to suffer, and to do this in a pandemic is particularly irresponsible. In Harlingen, the illegal immigrants being released are testing positive for COVID-19 at a rate 7 times higher than the U.S. population. This makes no sense.
Just very quickly, instead of asking a Republican or a Democrat, why don't you ask the people in charge of policing the border what the problem is? Rather than making a political statement and a question, why don't you walk right over there and ask the guy, what the hell happened? We got a chart. I'll give it to you. This was June right here. See this spike? It was big. What did Trump do? He told Mexico, we're going to put tariffs on all your products unless you allow us to have asylum seekers stay in Mexico. What happened? It went down to a 45-year low because nobody's going to pay $20,000 to come to Mexico and wait for 4 years. The day the first plane load of kids went back to Central America, the unaccompanied minor problem went to a 45-year low. So why don't you do your job as a reporter and ask the professionals what the hell has happened in the last couple of months, and they will tell you. They told the Biden administration, if you do what you're planning, we're going to lose control of the border. They were right.
The real threat to America is not the Chinese government or paralyzed global trade. The real threat to this country is people who didn't vote for Joe Biden. Watch.
And if confirmed, I will fight hard to stamp out sexual assault and to rid our ranks of racists and extremists. The job of the Department of Defense is to keep America safe from our enemies. But we can't do that if some of those enemies lie within our own ranks.
So Republicans voted to confirm him. He is himself an extremist. And they have said virtually nothing about Lloyd Austin since because they're paralyzed. They're paralyzed because Lloyd Austin has no problem calling his opponents racist immediately, ridding our ranks of racists and extremists. The key question is, how does Lloyd Austin define a racist or an extremist? The definition matters. This show has been denounced as a dangerous white supremacist organ for the crime of reading Martin Luther King quotes on the air. So it's worth finding out what those words mean. But Lloyd Austin doesn't provide a definition. And that's not accidental, because what you're seeing is not an attempt to make the military better. What you're seeing is a political purge of the military. Consider what has been happening during the military's training on, quote, extremism. A lot of enlisted soldiers have asked a pretty basic question. Hey, wait a minute. Weren't the BLM and Antifa rioters this summer extremists? Seems like they were. They murdered people. They murdered a lot more people than died at the Capitol on January 6th. A lot more. They burned businesses. They wrecked cities. In some places, it took the National Guard to stop them. So why aren't these people, quote, extremists? Good question. Well, a man called Ramon Colon Lopez was called in to explain why, to tell the troops why they were wrong. Colon Lopez is the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These questions, he conceded, are, quote, coming from every echelon that we're talking to. Some people may think, all right, so the events of 6th of January happened. How come you're not looking at the situation that was going on in Seattle prior to that? Well, yeah, exactly. Kind of an obvious question. Well, Ramon Colon Lopez has an answer. Actually, it's more of a threat. Quote, I am concerned about the way that some people are looking at the current environment and what they are thinking they can do and act upon based upon their personal beliefs. Oh, in other words, if you ask questions like these obvious questions, you are by definition dangerous. Colon Lopez said he was working hard to, quote, make sure that military members understand the difference between Seattle and Washington, D.C. All right, what are those differences exactly? Well, here's one. BLM, Colon Lopez explained, is a, quote, social injustice organization, and therefore it's not extreme. Also, quote, when the military called upon us to go ahead and support an effort in Washington, we did. We never got called for the law enforcement issue that was happening in Seattle. Oh, so the mayor of Seattle never called the National Guard to put down Antifa. Therefore, Antifa is not an extremist organization.
Everyone, sit. Hi. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It is so great to be here. And I have to tell you, I was downstairs with the incredible Congresswoman who I'm about to talk about and Secretary. And, when I look at those children, our babies, because I was raised to understand that the children of the community are the children of the community. And I look at those, those kids are whip smart. They had all kinds of questions. I am positive there is one of them who will be president of the United States. She is just phenomenal. But when I look at them...
surrender the frame. We allow ourselves to be lulled into this concept that what we really need to be talking about is whether or not there are people who liked the wrong meme or might be members of the wrong listserv or get their news in the wrong places. Look, in China right now, Tucker, they're not doing gender sensitivity training. They're not wondering whether or not their military is woke enough. They're wondering whether or not they're advancing in critical areas like quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Now we see the wokeification of the Department of Defense, and the reason why is because the leftists have long since taken control of the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Department of State, and the Department of Defense was this last bastion where conservatives maintained a substantial amount of influence, and they're trying to strangle out right-leaning folks who are in the military by monitoring their social media. And what troubles me is that this discussion in Congress is gaslighting exactly what the Biden administration is doing. They're worried about wokeness not winning, and our country deserves better, and our military deserves better.
Two irreconcilable views of the same region. Western governments say gross human rights abuses are being carried out against the Uyghur people in Xinjiang. China insists Xinjiang is a wonderful land full of happy people whose rights are protected. Today, it unveiled sanctions against individuals and organisations in the UK who disagreed with that, accusing them of interfering in its internal affairs and spreading lies.
Xinjiang definitely does not deserve the negative attention it is getting right now. The human rights in Xinjiang cannot be defined by a few satellite images, fake reports, cobbled together.
Is now exploiting very cynically the way that we are tearing ourselves apart, and particularly the way our left is tearing into us. This identity politics, the moral relativism, the exaggeration of our supposed racism, the attacks on our supposed history of genocide. In fact, the kind of stuff, the kind of absurd criticism I heard just yesterday right here on Sky News from Mark Liebler, co-chair of the Referendum Council that wants Australia to have a kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament.
We didn't occupy this country by consent. We started off by murdering them.
Who is this we? Who is this we that Mark Liebler says started off here by murdering Aborigines? It wasn't me. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't my grandparents back in Holland. Was it you? Was it you that sort of went off murdering Aborigines.
We begin with the violent storms ripping across the South. At least 23 reported tornadoes in 3 states, one cutting across Alabama for 100 miles, the death toll rising.
Breaking news out of Egypt where 2 trains have collided. The Ministry of Health tells CNN at least 32 people have been killed, dozens more injured.
If I was to guess, this virus started transmitting somewhere in September, October in Wuhan.
September, October.
That's my own view. It's an only opinion. I'm allowed to have opinions now. I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. Other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in a laboratory to infect a laboratory worker.
Shipping rates for oil tankers have nearly doubled this week as a container ship blocks all traffic along one of the world's busiest trade routes. The 400-metre vessel Ever Given has been wedged in the Suez Canal since Tuesday. Efforts are underway to free the ship, but it's feared bad weather could delay the operation for weeks. The suspension of traffic has deepened problems for shipping lines in Europe and Asia, already facing disruption and delays.
Every day this canteen is packed with students all coming in here to pick up a hot meal as the COVID crisis continues to bite. Students have been hit hard by the pandemic. Many are now without work and the means to support themselves. Demand for financial help from Cruz, a public service for student life, which also runs services like this canteen, has increased sharply.